Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sree's daily global COVID-19 show. My name is Sree Sreenivasan, and it's my honor to convene this daily conversation around all things COVID-19. We discuss the health crisis, the financial crisis, and the inequality crisis. We're always looking for theme suggestions, guest suggestions, and more. Sree@sree.net is my email address. Today is episode 186, covering the White House. And our guest is S.V. Dáte, White House correspondent for Huffington Post, the author of 8 books, including 5 novels. His latest nonfiction book, The Useful Idiot, How Donald Trump Killed the Republican Party with Racism, and the Rest of Us with Coronavirus. You'll meet Shirish in just a minute. Please stand by to say hello to him. In the meantime, hi everybody, I'm Sree. Thank you so much for being here. I'm the Marshall Loeb Visiting Professor of Digital Innovation at Stony Brook School of Journalism and the co-founder of Digimentors, a social, digital, and virtual events consulting company. Our motto, don't cancel your event without talking to us. We love talking virtual events, so please get in touch. My email address is right here. We've done events for 50 people and 100,000 people. I bet your event is somewhere in between those two numbers. So please get in touch, and we'd love to talk to you. This is our show. In our first 175 episodes, we've had more than 1 million viewers, 129 million social impressions. We've had 316 guests from 185. This is 316 guests, including 185 women. We're going to keep upping that ratio. The guests have come from 63 cities in 17 countries, including the chief scientist of the World Health Organization. We've had doctors, nurses, authors, journalists, CEOs, founders, teachers, professors, and so much more. We're in partnership with Scroll Global and Scroll.in. Please check them out. Scroll.in is one of India's leading news, information, and culture websites. Our entire archives can be found at youtube.com/Sreenet. Please hit that subscribe button when you get a chance. And we're able to do this because of 2 sets of people. Our producers, Rose Horowitz at Rose Horowitz 31 and Vandana Menon, Vandana_Menon. They have been with me every single day for 186 days. And we're also able to do this because of our sponsors. And we are so grateful to them, and we will thank them one by one in a few minutes. But for now, I know you are ready to talk about covering the White House, this White House, in the middle of the biggest crisis since World War II. And we're going to meet Sree Dáte, who is the White House correspondent for Huffington Post, and he is going to be with me in just a minute at SV Dáte, D-A-T-E. Please follow him on Twitter, and please check out his website. We'll ask him about his very interesting interaction with the president back in August, and so much more. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome S.V. Dáte. Hi.
Hey there, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. Are you a Saturday morning kind of person or not?
Well, I'm a pretty much every morning kind of person. So our president has a lot of views he shares on Twitter at around 5:36. So yes, that's part of the job now.
So you have to be up and at 'em. I can understand that. My first question always is, how are you? Where are you? And how's your family been through this crisis?
Well, we've been lucky. We have not gotten sick. We've managed to do the things that we need to do to keep doing what our jobs and our livelihoods. And so far so good. But thank you. I'm in Virginia, and across the river from Washington, about 6 miles from the White House.
How often have you had to go into the White House? Have you been able to go into the White House in the last few weeks?
Yes, I've been a couple of times, several times in the last few weeks. The White House Correspondents Association pretty early on instituted a rotation to try to keep people from being around each other as little as possible. And so I go and take what we call a pool day when I represent pretty much all print newspapers and print publications, websites all over the country. And I send out pool reports to everyone, saying what the president has done, what he has said, and who's meeting with him, et cetera. And on those days, sometimes we have news conferences. And that was the occasion that was back in August when I happened to be there because of my pool day. And he had a news conference, and I was able to ask him, as it turned out, just one question. Didn't really get an answer, but,
We'll show that video clip in just a few minutes because I think that was one of the pivotal moments of this relationship that he's had with the American press. And we saw several problems with the way, not only that he didn't answer, but I thought the way the next correspondent did not back you up with. And this is not just a problem with you, but this has been a problem we have seen. A lot of us lay people watching on the outside are confused about that. And we'll talk about the dynamics in the White House and so much more. Tell us about, let's start because we have people all over the world watching. They're sharing this right now on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. So on all those platforms, we're live right now, and your friends can watch live or later. So please tag and share your friends. This is a rare chance to meet a White House correspondent in the middle of this pandemic and to talk to SV Dáte. He's Shirish. What does the V stand for?
Vishwanath, which is, as in many languages, it's a patronymic. It's my father's first name.
And of course, this I know that many people who see your name don't know it's an Indian name, but you are Indian American and you're Marathi, right?
Right.
The DATE, for those of us who know me, tells us it's probably from the Indian state of Maharashtra.
That is correct. I was born in Pune, long time ago, but yeah.
Tell us your story. So you're born in Pune. Tell us about your family, and then fast forward to our story here.
Sure. My parents are both physicians, retired now, but they were both educated and trained in India. And at the time, everyone was going overseas in order to get further education and opportunities. And my parents were just at that cusp where people stopped going to Great Britain and started going to America. So I grew up in the places where my parents, had jobs. So that would have been Boston, Western New York, and then ultimately Southern California. And I went to college in California and then ultimately came back east to get jobs as a journalist. So that's how I ended up here. I spent most of my career in Florida and about 20 years, I guess. And it was from there that I actually took a couple of years and went sailing, with my family. We went to Europe and the Caribbean on the way back. It was 2 years. And that was right at the time of the Great Recession in 2009, 2010. And as we were coming back, I realized there were no jobs really to be had in Florida in journalism. So instead of going back to Florida, we just continued sailing right up the East Coast and came into the Chesapeake. And that's how we wound up in Washington, D.C.
That's how you wound up here because of the sailing. That's amazing. What was that like to sail so much? And how old was the family or the kids when you were doing that?
My sons were 9 and 11 when we left Florida, and they were homeschooled, boat schooled, I guess, right, for 2 years. And we had the entire curriculum for each child aboard each of those years. So you can imagine half the weight of the boat was books and workbooks and so on that we had to take with us. But it was the most difficult thing I've ever done, but was also the most rewarding, the best thing I've ever done. And I think it's something that the boys will always remember. And sometimes I think they will probably appreciate it more in retrospect than they did at the time. They were kind of young to appreciate some of the things we were doing, but once in a while, I think even then they understood just how unusual and amazing this was.
I just can't imagine trying to, I have enough trouble packing for a long weekend, let alone 2 years. And internet connectivity and all of that must have been, very sparse most of the time.
Well, offshore, it was non-existent. And that was actually, in my view, a good thing. It was nice to be able to just be away from everything. We had long-range radios and a VHF, and we had, a sat phone in case we got into trouble and things like that. But it was, of course, it was different then than now. The internet wasn't so much part of everyone's life as it is today back in 2009, 2010. But it was nice. But the boys, of course, were very thrilled whenever we went to a marina or a harbor where there was an internet cafe and we could go in and they could get online and, visit with their friends and do all the stuff they like to do.
And that must have been so it's almost a culture shock. It's one thing to be homeschooled, it's another to be boat schooled and then to kind of come back onto land for good. What was that like?
Well, for good, let's not rule out the possibilities of the future, right? So it was
the way the planet's going, you may have had a head start. You're
right,
not ready as the water rises.
Right. Well, it was difficult to come back. Honestly, you get used to making your own decisions and having so much more control over your life, about every part of your life than you do when you're working in an environment with coworkers and bosses and so forth, and teachers. So it was an adjustment, but it's important to be able to work with people. So I guess there was, and the money ran out, so there was also that. So we had to come back.
You mean no one was paying you to do this world tour, huh?
No, it wasn't.
The sponsorships.
Yeah, that was a failure of my part. I should have got the the Oracle and the Microsoft deals beforehand, put their names on the side of the boat, and we would have been fine.
And of course nowadays those things might even be more plausible, right? That people were, that you could get like live tweeting, live Facebooking from your trip. There would be people who'd want to sponsor something like that.
Yeah, it didn't even occur to me at the time, but yeah, I guess it is. People watch all kinds of stuff on the internet and spend hours doing it. So, it takes a big world, I guess, right?
Yeah, it does. All right, so let's show everybody this question, because now this is on August 13th. Set up the backdrop of this, which was it was one of the White House coronavirus briefings, or it was just him? What was the context? Well, and we will hear your question,
right?
But you can see on the tweet that I did after your post with the video is that you were actually asking a full question. The question was, Mr. President, do you regret lying so frequently to the American people these last 3 years so that the majority of them don't believe you now? And that's a excellent question. That's not exactly how it came out, or right, the chance that you had to ask. So set that up for us and I'll play the video.
Right. Well, actually, I noticed, as did everyone, I suppose, when he came down his escalator. And the first time I saw him in New Hampshire a couple of weeks later, back in 2015, that the majority of the things that came out of his mouth were false. My life would be much easier if all I had to write about and cover were those things that he said were true. So for years, I've been trying to get the opportunity to ask him about his use of falsehoods, lies, and there has not been a time. I mean, I've tried to shout the question in times when he's tried to get him, when he goes on the helicopter and goes to Andrews Air Force Base to go somewhere else. But this was the very first time that, because of the coronavirus pandemic, now we have a limited number of reporters in the briefing room, and so my chances, obviously, of getting called on are higher. Now, actually, I tried to ask this exact question back in March. In fact, I called up the transcript because I was curious as to what exactly I asked. This was March 18th. There was a news conference. Back then, there were still coronavirus news conferences. There were still people who were experts about the disease and epidemiology, et cetera, who were actually being brought in. That's all ended now. But on March 18th, he called on me, surprisingly, and I asked, Mr. President, your credibility ratings are very low. There was a recent NPR poll, and I was going to finish with, do you regret lying to the American people so they won't believe you now in this time of crisis? And he said, his response was, who are you asking with that question? And he said, and then I tried to respond further, and he said, because I see that they're very high. If you look, I'm 95% in the Republican Party. I tried to get it back on track with your credibility, sir. We just had a poll that was done by a very reputable group where I'm beating Sleepy Joe Biden by a lot in Florida, in the state of Florida and other states, so I don't really know who you're talking about. And then he went to the next reporter and so forth. And I learned a lesson. And the lesson was no preface, certainly not about polls, because whenever he hears the word poll, he starts off with all fake polls, this poll, that poll. I'm 96% Republicans, et cetera. So the only way to do this, if I ever got the opportunity again, was to just ask what I wanted to ask. And amazingly, he called me again in August, and that's when I actually did ask him what I wanted to ask him.
All right, so let's listen to that that exchange right here. Let's see. I'm just going to play that video so that everyone can get a sense of that moment. And so this was, how many people were in the room at the time?
Well, there were, I think there's 2 reporters per row. There's 7 rows, so there's 14 reporters. And the way this works is, as the print representative, I'm way in the back, and he doesn't often get to everyone in the room. The wire services and TV are in the front, is how it works. So I was actually surprised that he even called on me. Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't go usually that far back, is that right?
Sometimes he does, depending on his mood. He likes to. He loves the attention of
Sure.
news conferences being on TV. So
sure. All right, let's listen to this.
Please, Mr. President. After 3.5 years, you regretted all the lying you've done to the American people.
All the what?
All the lying, all the dishonesties.
And who is that?
You have done. Tens of
Yeah,
thousands.
go ahead, please. Go ahead.
I wanted to ask about payroll tax.
Please.
Mr. President.
So let's pause that there. So first of all, great job on asking the question. Our job is to hold truth to power and speak truth to power, and you did that. Interestingly, in a question about lying. But the second part of that, where the next reporter instead is asked about payroll taxes, when he has an obligation to follow up on your question or say, Mr. President, what about that question? So talk about both aspects of that, please.
Right. Well, let me take the second one first, because I know a lot of people, at least that I've seen, criticize the reporter for asking that. So people understand who are not journalists how this works. I've been doing this for a long time. And I used to work for the Associated Press, which is one of the wire services. And how this works is, in the morning, you get an assignment. You're to write X number of words, 300, 400, 600, about this particular topic. And the topic might be the trade issues with China. It might be the coronavirus. It could be the payroll tax. And so you've done all your reporting. You have all the facts together that you need. And all you need now is the latest view from the president of the United States or the administration. And so that is your question. If you get called upon to ask, and then you can plug it into your story, you file it, you're done. So that's how it used to work traditionally and still does for a lot of folks. And I understand that. I totally understand that. Personally, I think that we're in a situation now with, an unusual president whose understanding of the world has been made very clear. He doesn't know how the payroll tax works. He doesn't know how the Social Security Trust Fund works. Every time he says something about these issues, the White House or someone in Treasury or he himself takes it back or changes it the next day or the day after. So it doesn't really matter what he says about the payroll tax because he doesn't understand about the payroll tax. What's the point in asking him? That's my view. And I work for a news outlet that I don't have to write about the payroll tax on any given day. I can write about what I think is important. And what I think is important right now is how it is that our president is so comfortable in lying all the time about everything, pretty much every day. And that's why I asked what I did. And as we saw, other folks are now starting to ask similar questions. We saw my colleague at ABC asked a similar question just the other day. So maybe now and going forward, people will understand and will appreciate that this is a legitimate question. This is who he is. And we as a society have elected him. And we have a right to know what he's doing and why he's doing it this way.
I think your question has taken on even more significance since the book by Bob Woodward came out, because he knew he was lying to all of us when he said that, that this will go away, that this is nothing worse than the flu. And he knew, he had been briefed, and he told Bob Woodward that what he knew about this, and then he lied on camera to the rest of us. And that's why your question, and it's in fact the full part of your question, is so important, that you asked here, and I can just show folks in the comment here. You can see below the tweet, you can see the full question. Mr. President, do you regret lying so frequently to the American people these last 3 years so that the majority of them don't believe you now? And that's the point. It's not just that he lied so much, which he has done, obviously, but it's the fact that that lying has now cost him the credibility of the White House. That's
right.
The problem. Like,
Absolutely. No. And I think that gets lost here is that, and I made this point both in the book, as well as the longer piece I did last year for HuffPost about all his lies. Do you remember when he did that Sharpie, that hurricane map, and drew in Alabama because he tweeted that Alabama might also be struck by this hurricane? And of course, Alabama was not going to be struck by the hurricane. The consensus weather forecast at the time he sent that tweet was that the storm was going to parallel the Florida East Coast and then quite likely go offshore, which is in fact what happened. But he did it anyway, kind of for fun. There was no reason at all to include Alabama in that tweet, and he scared people. He upended some people's lives for a few days. Well, do we evacuate? Do we not evacuate? Is this going to come ashore here? Is this? And his understanding of meteorology is exactly zero. Let's be clear. He's not a meteorologist. He's not an expert in hurricanes. He's this guy who lived in New York and did a reality TV show. Okay, so he has no expertise in this matter whatsoever. And yet he got into a fight with the National Hurricane Center, one of the premier meteorological organizations in the world. And my worry at the time was, okay, hurricanes are knowable. We have satellites, we have imagery, we have buoys, planes, all kinds of things. So we know what's going on. Everyone gets this information, and we can ignore the president when we obviously see that, he's just saying random stuff. It doesn't matter what he says about the storm. My worry then, and I expressed this, in January, actually, was when that first article published. What happens when there's a crisis where you actually need the president and only the president has access to this information? For example, and I even pointed out, a pandemic or an outbreak of a dangerous disease. And just 1 week later, there it was. We saw that Wuhan was shut down, and sure enough, the president in his intelligence briefings had access to that information. He ignored it. He was golfing for the first week of January. He didn't even pay attention to what was in the briefing book. So yeah, leadership matters. Leadership matters a lot. And when you've torched your credibility like this president has, how do you then get collective agreement in the country to move forward in a way that we need to move forward? I mean, this is a rich country, and we have a lot of expertise in diseases and vaccines and et cetera. And yet our death rate per capita is horrible, right? Germany's is 1/5 of what it is in the United States. And we could have been like Germany had we behaved the way Germans did with the leadership of Angela Merkel. And instead we had the president who called it a hoax. He said it was going to go away on its own. It was not as bad as the flu. And this went on and on and on. As you point out, he knew on February 7th that this was an airborne, transmissible, deadly disease. And as late as June, remember, even after all of this happened in New York and all the shutdowns all over the country, he went to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and made fun of the virus. Remember that? I mean, he said that, it's like the sniffles. And, I said to my people, slow the testing down, please. Come on. I mean, he's a president.
Herman Cain paid with his life. Poor Herman Cain paid for it with his life. There is no doubt about that. He posted Herman Cain, the former Republican presidential candidate in 2012.
Right.
He went there. He was not wearing a mask. He was with his family, and he posted tweets about proudly being there, and he died. And in the parade of folks all the rainbow of people they tried to show at the Republican campaign, they didn't once mention Herman Cain and his passing as a direct result of the Trump lies that we're all living with. So we want to talk about your book. We want to talk about what it's like to be a correspondent and a little bit of your journey. You're the son of two doctors who I'm sure were not thinking that journalist is the most obvious career path for their son. So we'll talk about all of that in when we're going to take a little break here so we can thank our sponsors. And I want everyone, including Sirish, to please tweet and tag your friends right now. We're going to give him a little break. So Esri will come right back to you in just a moment. So everybody, please share this with your friends and family right now. Tag your friends on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and on LinkedIn. What an amazing conversation we're having. People are commenting from around the world. We'll read those comments to you, and we will talk to SV Dáte, the Huffington Post correspondent in the White House. And by the way, these are not his books, but we will talk about his book in just a minute. But these are some of the books of the people I have interviewed on this show and my weekly show on the New York Times Read Along. This is a book by Cornelia Dean, the former science editor of the New York Times, Making Sense of Science. We did an interview with Natalie Nixon, Eric Weiner. We have Hate Monger, a book about the awful man named Stephen Miller, Hypereducation by Pavan Dhingra, who is an author who was with us and a professor about higher ed. Primitive, a book by Marco Greenberg. The Inventor in You by Charles Cunnan Carroll, who's also a sponsor of the show. And You Next, book by Antonio Johnson about Black barbershop culture. Simranjeet Singh's book, Fauja Singh Keeps Going, about Fauja Singh, the oldest marathoner in history. And a New York Street Portraiture by Kurt Boone. Kurt is a bike messenger, journalist, and poet who was here yesterday for our 9/11 episode with Stella Kramer and Stephen Kaplan. Both of them are former New York Times photo editors. So that's the range of things that we do on the show. You should know that at 10 o'clock Eastern, our friend Stephen Kaplan, who works with me at Digimentors, is hosting his own show, Spin It Social Hour, every Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern. So please do check him out and follow him as well. And so let me thank our sponsors for our ability to bring you this every single day, this series of stories and segments and interviews. We want to thank Nunbelievable, divinely delicious cookies on a mission. Each handcrafted cookie provides a meal for those in need. One cookie equals one meal. We also want to thank Charles Cunnan Carroll for The Inventor in You, a step-by-step guide to your first invention. He's the developer of more than 80 patents. At Inventor Charles, guidetoinvention.com is his website. Please check those out. And we also want to thank our friends who are putting together the One Shared World Conference. And here it is, Rise or Fall Together, the OneShared.World Interdependent Summit, Thursday, September 17th, 9 to noon. So this coming Thursday, Renee Fleming, who's a world-acclaimed singer, David Nabarro, the WHO Special Envoy on COVID-19, Jairam Ramesh, an MP and environmental expert from India, and Kehkashan Basu, UN Human Rights Champion and founder of the Green Hope Foundation. And not seen on the screen right now is the Dalai Lama and Dr. Tedros, the Secretary General of the UN. They'll all be at OneShared.World. Please sign up now. It's free. OneShared.World/live. OneShared.World/live. Please check that out and please sign up. I'm proud to have our team Digimentors do the production with an enormously big group of volunteers and others. We're putting that together with my friend Jamie Metzel, who was a guest on this show several weeks ago. So thank you so much for watching. Big thanks to all our sponsors. And now we're going to bring back SV Dáte, Sree Sreenivasan Dáte, who is our guest. And he will be talking to us right now about his career, his work, and his book, The Useful Idiot, How Donald Trump Killed the Republican Party with Racism and the Rest of Us with Coronavirus. And my first question to him when he comes back is about that title. So, hi, Sree, thanks for coming back. And I hope you caught your breath for a minute there. Let me ask you about that title. That is what President Trump would call a tough title, right? Like when he wants to say something is difficult, or he's trying to show flex his muscles, he'll say it was tough. They were very tough. And tell me about the origin of that title. What was the discussion about that title among you, your friends, families, editors, etc.? And do you feel like having a title like that, that's so dramatic and so tough, puts you in a difficult position as a White House correspondent?
Well, it would if it weren't true. I mean, and I think the book and the chapters in the book describe why he has done these things, right? I mean, obviously he hasn't killed all of us with the coronavirus, but 190,000 people have died from it. 150,000 probably who would not have died had we done things the way, for example, Germany did. So yeah, tough title, sure, but I think backed up by the facts. Now, regarding the racism, Donald Trump's own history with racism is out in the open. It's knowable, it's known. His very first mention in the New York Times was back in 1973, I want to say, when the Richard Nixon Justice Department came down on him and his father for refusing to rent apartments to Black people. So that was the very first time he made it into the paper that he craves attention from to this day. It's gone on from there. We have the Central Park 5 episode where he demanded the death penalty for 5 teens, Latino and Black, who were accused in the mugging and rape of a jogger in Central Park. They were all innocent. They were proven innocent, and the president, who's now the president, still said no, they're guilty and they should get the death penalty. The use of the birther story was how he got to be such a big name in the Republican Party. The idea that Barack Obama was not born in the United States, that he was born somehow in Kenya or Indonesia, and just trying to delegitimize the first African-American president. So there's a long history here. And how he got to be president, and I saw this firsthand and it's described in the book, a lot of the voters in the Republican primary, not a majority, but a significant number, really want the America the way that it was in 1950. Sort of the way that if you look back on old TV shows, Leave It to Beaver or Father Knows Best, a predominantly, almost exclusively white society, very patriarchal, where it's if you're born white, and particularly if you're born white and male, your life is pretty much set for you. And the next generation, the generation after that, will only have even better things. And now that, that's kind of a fiction. Life really wasn't like that in the 1950s. And even if it was, it's never coming back. And pretty much everyone knows this. And the only person in the Republican field to try to suggest that he could bring it back, make America great again, was Donald Trump. And that's why he won that nomination. He didn't win it with a majority of the Republican primary votes. He only had like 32, 33, 34% by the time that the primary season ended. So that was where that is how he got to be president. And that is the approach that the Republican Party had wanted to get rid of. Remember this, after the 2012 loss to Obama, and after they sat down and they wrote this report saying we lost because we're not appealing to the America of tomorrow, that Latino voters don't like us, African-American voters don't like us, Asian voters don't like us, and we need to change that. And they sat down and they did this long report about how they could fix it. And then along comes Donald Trump and takes the report and sets it on fire. So that's what he's done to the party, with their acquiescence and help, mind. But that's what he's done, and that's why the title is what it is. And I'm not the only one saying this, by the way. I mean, Stuart Stevens, who is a top strategist for the Romney campaign in 2012, who worked for George W. Bush's 2 campaigns, wrote an entire book just about that piece of what I wrote about, was that, the Republican Party's reliance on the Southern strategy, on racism, has cost them its future. So I'm happy to defend that title any day of the week. And I think it's fair, tough maybe, but I'm not the one who ignored the virus for 7 weeks and it didn't read my intelligence briefings and so on. So a
couple of things that'll come out of that I think about as your sharing your thoughts on that. Number one is, did you, after the question you asked and after the title of this book came out, surely no one's read the book in the White House because they don't seem to read any of the books themselves, but they certainly are aware of it. Was there any attempt to try to keep you out of the White House?
No, there was no attempt to do that. I did get a little bit of a snarky response from one of the White House spokespeople, but I'm used to that. I mean, that didn't bother me. They really don't have any business telling me what I can and can't cover. I mean, this is the White House Correspondents Association that determines the pool rotation and who is in on what days, and we decide among ourselves. And that's not the role of the White House to get involved with those sorts of calls. So if they had done that, I think there would have been a huge outcry, and I don't know how they might have managed anyway. So no, I haven't really gotten much pushback from the White House. On the other hand, what are they going to do? Not give me an interview with the president? I've been asking since he became president to get an interview, and they haven't granted one. So, all right, I guess they can continue not giving me one, but that's life, I suppose. They don't give interviews to a lot of different people. I'm just one of them.
So you said that Trump won with some 30-something percent of the Republican primary voters, but now he is well over 85, maybe 90% of Republican voters now. And after the Romney disaster, they sat down and said, we've got to change, and we've got to do everything except what Trump would end up doing to win the nomination and be president. So right. What do you say to Republicans who say that report was wrong? Look at us. We're doing fine now. Yeah, you're right. If he loses this election in 2020 in 50-something days, then all of this that you've said is true. But if he wins, then is that proof that that strategy was not wrong? You get 8 years of your presidency, and you'll never get the Republican Party back if he wins this time.
That's possible. There may not be a Republican Party as we knew it, even if he loses. I mean, it may be so damaged that it's not coming back in any recognizable form. Let's remember here that he did not get a majority of the popular vote in this country, right? He got 46%, I believe. And a lot of the people who voted for him in 2016 were standard Republican voters, right? Who, were not interested in bringing back the America of 1950. They're interested in lower taxes. They're interested in stability. They're interested in making sure their retirement fund remains whole and continues to grow, at a reasonable rate. And I think many of them looked at Donald Trump and say, how bad can he be? He's a billionaire, right? I mean, he's a businessman. And some of them maybe even knew that he was a fake businessman and a fake billionaire, but voted for him anyway because, as the title of the book, The Useful Idiot, suggests, they saw in him a means to certain goals. And I break down in the book exactly what segments these are. You have those who really do want the judiciary, the federal judiciary, to bring back the days of segregation almost, or of a predominantly white society, or a society where white males are operating things and will continue to operate things going forward. They think that, wrongly, I believe, but they think that having all the federal judges vote on social issues in the way they want will be their ticket to that. There were others who mainly were interested in rolling back regulations. I mean, corporations and shareholders in corporations wanted to roll back regulations on environmental regulations, safety regulations, worker safety regulations, consumer regulations, because it's more profitable not to have them, right? And and sure enough, he's done that because he doesn't really care about those sort of things anyway. And then you had another person who saw him as a useful idiot, and that was Vladimir Putin, who got exactly what he wanted. I mean, for Putin, who is a reactionary, who really does wish that the world was like it was in the 1980s when the Soviet Union was still, a strong country. the way to get that to happen with the new Russia is for the United States and the Western Europe to be weakened. And who better to do that than Donald Trump, who's essentially done everything that Putin has wanted in that regard. I mean, he is on a daily basis, he attacks the NATO alliance, he attacks the European Union. He doesn't really understand international trade, but he has a lot of strong opinions on it anyway, most of them detrimental to the United States. But, so yeah, I mean, he was a useful idiot in the classical definition of that phrase, going back to Leninist times, for a group of people who got what they wanted. It's not enough to get him back to 270 electoral votes. So to get there, he needs to persuade again those Republicans who really aren't part of this that they're better off with him than without him.
By the way, the Matryoshka dolls behind me are in honor of the Russian meddling. I lived in Moscow as a little kid and came basically from Russia with a stop in India to the Upper East Side of New York, to the duck and cover drills that we had, for people who were too young or didn't live in America. In 1980, kids like me, I was 9 years old, I was taught the importance of, if you see the mushroom cloud flash of light, if you see the flash, duck and cover under your desk, as if there was any hope of surviving. Like, that was the evil empire, right? Like, we knew that. Even Ronald Reagan, who, whatever you might think of him, at least knew who the enemy was at the time of the United States. And from that moment, if you said to me 40 years from now, there will be a president who will do the bidding in every instance of where there's an opportunity to go against Russia or go against or against America, he would go against America every single time he had a choice. I would not have believed it. And by the way, I would not have survived the nuclear flash, but that was the world we lived in. And so Republicans who are hawks on Russia and the Soviet Union, now to be in his pocket like this is just one of many, many shocking things. I'll also say, because I'm seeing in the comments someone asking about Germany and those numbers and saying, did he really kill all those people, President Trump? I want to quote one of the doctors who was on CNN yesterday, who said that, and we all heard this, right? Candidate Trump said he could shoot one person on Fifth Avenue and he wouldn't lose a single voter. First of all, whoever says something like that, that itself should have been disqualifying, to imagine shooting one of your own citizens. But what this doctor on CNN said is that compared to Germany, and Germany, by the way, didn't have the world's best response. It had a good, strong response by Angela Merkel and others, but it was not the world's best. They still lost 9,000 people. They lost 9,000 people. One second. I just want to. Sorry, 1 second. I have somebody watching on Zoom, and so they're not muted, so that's why you're hearing them right now. So I'm going to say to my friends, Judy and Michael, we need you to mute. They're not.
It takes preparation.
Let me just stop sharing there for 1 second. Sorry about this. Okay. One second. Sorry about this. Suresh, tell us about your work with the book. How did that come about? And then I'm going to stop the conversation on the other side. Go ahead.
Well, I've been thinking about a book about the president, this president, and about the Republican Party for a couple of years. As I say in the preface, I didn't really want to write it because, I've written 2 biographies before. I enjoy writing novels because you can make the ending the way the ending ought to be. I mean, the bad guy can get it at the end. The bad guy can be eaten by a tiger shark or an angry badger or something like that. And in real life, that doesn't always happen, right? In real life, truth and justice don't always prevail. Sometimes the bad guy wins, and and all you can do in nonfiction is just write about it. That's too much like the day job. Nonetheless, when the president of the United States got out there on, I believe it was April 23rd, and said, we really ought to look into injecting disinfectants directly into the lungs because it does a number on the lungs, and maybe we should look into that. We're going to have medical doctors check into it, and then maybe also get some ultraviolet light into the body in order to deal with this. I was aghast. I could not believe this. This was the president of the United States suggesting that maybe injecting disinfectants into the body was a good thing. And of course, you have the makers of Lysol and Dettol and all the others immediately put out statements saying, no. You should not in any way, shape, or form actually bring these cleaning products into your body. That would be a very bad thing. For liability reasons, obviously, they did these things. But still, it was stunning to me that he would say such a thing. And it was even more stunning that the entire Greek chorus of apologists that have come up to defend Trump no matter what he says and does defended him on this as well. And I said, okay, at that point I said, all right, I'm gonna write this book and I'm gonna finish it. And that's the way it's gonna be, because this is important. And what he's doing here is literally leading to the deaths of people. People are dying because we have someone who is not able to do this job. And that was not obvious to a lot of people. People still thought, well, he's doing the best he can and so forth. And I like his policies. And I said, guys, you don't get on an airplane and expect the pilot to be with you on your issues, right? You want him to land the damn plane. That's the point. Airlines don't pay pilots $200,000 a year to land the plane on sunny days with no wind, right? They pay them that much money for the day that everything breaks, that the hydraulics fail, that they lose an engine, and there's a thunderstorm and a crosswind. That's what we need in a president. You need someone there for the day that bad things happen, maybe things you didn't even imagine could happen. That's what you need in a position that important. And we, all of us, failed by not making sure that happened in 2016. And the Republican Party failed the most because they knew damn well who this person was about. I talked to folks back in summer and fall of 2015 were just appalled that someone like Donald Trump could become their nominee. They let it happen. They could have stopped it, but they let it happen.
What could they have done?
Okay, and I described the scenario. There was.
By the way, we should tell people that you also wrote a book about Jeb Bush. So you're familiar with the Republican Party and you understand the politics of the Republican Party very well. Right.
I covered Jeb Bush. I was the Tallahassee bureau chief for the Palm Beach Post, so I covered all 8 of his years as governor. And I wrote a book about him, and it was a tough book, right? I mean, Jeb is a very forceful person. He sees the world sometimes as it ought to be rather than as it is. And he thinks he can just will the world to his view. But when there were hurricanes and there were other bad things that happened, Jeb didn't mess around. I mean, the governor was excellent in disaster management and just competence, right? So I learned there that whatever your worldview is, you can still be a good leader. You can still be a competent emergency manager in chief. And he was that, certainly. What happened after that first debate in Cleveland? I remember that Reince Priebus was the chairman of the Republican Party at the time. Because Donald Trump said, well, maybe I'll support the nominee if it's not me. Maybe I won't. And right there was the opportunity to basically get rid of Donald Trump. And what Reince Priebus should have done was said, you will come down to my office in Washington, D.C. tomorrow morning at 6:30, and you will sign this promise that you're going to support the nominee no matter what, or you are done. No more debates for you. You can run independent if you want. And he didn't. Instead, he went up to Trump Tower and said, please, Mr. Trump, can you sign this pledge? Please, can you do this for us? And Trump, of course, signed it. And then immediately afterwards said, maybe I'll honor it, maybe I won't. Depends if they're mean to me. Well, that showed him right away exactly what the power relationship was between him and the party. And the party's defense at the time was, well, he's got so much money. If he runs independent, we're in trouble. He will siphon off our votes. And had they spent like 5 minutes on Google, they would have realized that's absurd. He doesn't have that kind of cash. He hasn't had it in years. No bank is lending to him. he's not going to run independent and spend his own money. That's just not a possibility. And they wouldn't. They were afraid, and they didn't do their jobs. And in a two-party system, your job as one of those two parties is to make sure that the person that you nominate is a credible commander-in-chief and a credible emergency manager-in-chief. And Donald Trump obviously was neither of those, and they nominated him anyway.
And here we are. Folks, we know you have questions for SV. Please write in, and we'll get to them in just a moment. Let me just finish the story about Germany and the U.S., the comparison that was made on CNN by one of the doctors, who was saying that Germany didn't have the best response, but a good response, much better than America. They lost 9,000 people. If you do per population, that's a difference of 150,000 lives.
Right.
That can be directly attributed to the lack of a mask mandate and proper follow-up and inspiration from the top, the lies from the top, all of that can be directly laid at. So if you want to do the math, so it's, when people say you can't compare it to South Korea, you can't compare it to Germany, they're smaller countries. True, they're smaller, but you've got to look proportionately. And there's no reason America with one, with such a, 4 or 5% of the world's population having 25% of the coronavirus deaths in the world. That is just unacceptable at every level. And it has exposed America for all the issues that it's had. And I blame the president. I blame the governors who followed his leadership instead of, you know what happened in Georgia, that a governor sued the mayor of Atlanta who wanted to put in a mask mandate, Like, these are things that don't happen in other countries. And this is where we are stuck here, and we are dying because of that. And that's why Sirisha's book is so important and the coverage that he's doing. Now, let's see what our viewers say, and people are watching from around the world. Jonathan's watching from the East Village. And by the way, tell me a memory of some of these cities as we go through. So New York, what is a memory of New York?
For me?
Yes.
Oh, well, I've not actually. Well, I know I lived very briefly in New York. I loved that I could walk down any street and for $1 buy a giant slice of some of the best pizza I've ever had. I've had better in Naples, Italy since then. Nonetheless.
Okay. All right. Okay. Slow down there. All right. We'll give you Italy, but don't go. What happens is on the show, people come in and then they start saying Chicago and Boston and other places. So we'll give you Naples. Okay, Naples, you're good. And my kids last night went to a place called Coronet, which is near Columbia University. Coronet pizza. The slices are as big as your face. Like that's basically their ad. Kumar saying hello. LinkedIn user says waiting to hear this. Linda says good morning from Long Island. Stefan is watching from New Jersey. He's about to start his show. We wish you the very best, Stefan. Rachel Cooper is watching from Cornwall, Connecticut. And here is Parche says hello. And Ashok is watching from Kerala in India. Have you been to Kerala?
I have not. No, I
You've
want
been
to.
to India, though. You've
I have. Yeah, I have not been in a long time. My understanding is it's changed a lot since I was little.
Yeah, you should definitely go to Kerala. Pradnya is watching from Silver Spring, Maryland, and that's near you in the Beltway. Well, we've got so many other folks watching. Sudha's watching from Hastings on Hudson, and lots of folks watching here. It says, White House reporters make me so mad. What do you think that's about? I think it's about this lack of cooperation we're talking about earlier. You explained that reporter who asked about the payroll tax, instead of saying, Mr. President, what about this guy's question over here? You are more forgiving, it seems, than the rest of us.
Well, I've been in that position, right? Having worked at the AP, I know exactly what that's like. You have hundreds of papers all over the country relying on that story to be out at a certain time. So I get that. But I will say, I have seen instances where reporters back each other up on the sorts of questions that I have asked. It doesn't happen always, but it has happened. And that's good to see, because this is important. I mean, this is important that we hold this president accountable for the things he says. It's unacceptable that it's treated as, oh, well, he just says things and what does it matter? Well, it matters a lot, obviously, as we've seen from that comparison. How many people died in Germany? And Germany, by the way, is an extremely fair comparison. In the book, I point out that South Korea probably is not fair. I mean, they had just had a MERS outbreak. Their government actually got into big trouble because of it. So they learned their lessons, and they had that experience, relatively in the recent past, so that they knew what to do. And their outbreak was different. It happened in a very particular place, and they were able to contain it. Germany was very much like us, very much. And the fact that our per capita fatality rate is five times what it was in Germany is just, that's on us. That's on the president and on the leadership and on the governors who decided they were more afraid of Donald Trump than they felt a responsibility to their own citizens.
Thank you for explaining that. Again, I think we can't say this enough. Diana's watching from Northern California, which is on fire at the moment. All parts of California, Oregon to San Diego. It seems like the air quality is among the worst in the world right now, if not the worst. And Diana she's the chief communications officer for the San Mateo County Health System. And she was a guest on my show last Sunday talking about her work and the work of her incredible team. And she's up early in California. Diana, thank you for being here last Sunday, being a guest. It gives me a chance to remind everyone that on Sundays, I do this show on positivity. We try to be positive, Suresh, in the middle of everything that's going on. And Damon Brown is my guest. He is a best-selling author, entrepreneur, and coach. And his new book is Build From Now, How to Know Your Power and See Your Abundance, 9 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow. So everybody, please join us for that. It'll be a very important conversation. Let's keep going down. By the way, good California memory from you, Suresh.
Oh, so many. Hiking in the Sierra Nevada. I did a hike of Half Dome as a freshman in college, and I did not realize just how many miles and how many vertical feet that was. And I think a friend of mine had been assigned the task of bringing enough food. He brought 2 packages of ramen for 3 of us. And we cooked, and water to cook the ramen at the top of Half Dome. We were so starved by the time we got down to the parking lot at the end of all this, at the end of the day.
Oh, amazing. Nirmal says, excellent conversation. He's the Straits Times correspondent in Washington, the Singapore paper. And you know him, right?
I'm sure I do. There's so many people in and out of the White House briefing room. And it's I actually ran for president of the WHCA last year because, I thought, what, we need a different approach to dealing with this White House. I didn't win, not surprising, but I wanted to get, that point of view out there.
Thank you. Let's see who else is here. Ron Thomas is watching from Dubai. Have you been?
Have I been? No. I'm trying to think of where the plane has stopped on the way to places, but I don't think I have.
And so when you did the world travels on the boat, for those of you who missed this earlier, he and his family with young kids spent 2 years sailing around the world. And to some people, that will sound like the most wonderful, blessed, lucky opportunity. For others, a total nightmare. And I hope you've written about that period, or you'll do a tweet thread so all of us following you on Twitter at svdate can see maybe some of your photographs, or I wish there was a documentary on this. I would love to have seen that. My mother's watching from Kerala. Hi, Amma. Love you. And we're saying hello. Sarah says, thank you for this important discussion. And Linda says, any thoughts on whether Trump just makes this stuff up on the fly, or does he have any advisors feeding him recommendations on disinformation for political purposes? Another way to ask this question, SV, is he playing three-dimensional chess while we're playing checkers? That's the analysis that we often hear.
No, he's not playing chess. He's making it up mostly on the fly. And that's why when people were fixating on the quote to Bob Woodward about, oh, we knew it was airborne and was deadly, and we know. Yeah, but his reality changes from minute to minute. So the next day, he was probably persuaded of the opposite, but depending on who he talked to. You have to understand that his worldview is not like that of a rational adult human being. I mean, if you've had children, you understand this well. I mean, he has like he's a bully, like a middle school boy. He has the impulse control of a toddler, and he has the guile of a high school student who hasn't done his homework. So just mix all those three and you've got the president. No, there's no three-dimensional. In fact, one of my favorite quotes about Donald Trump was about, is he playing multi-dimensional chess? This was in the New York Times. No, he's mainly eating the pieces. So just remember that. This is what we're dealing with.
By the way, when I said three-dimensional chess, all threat chess is three-dimensional if you're playing it on a board, right? As long as you're not playing it on a computer. So multi-dimensional is the right line. But you said the quote that you read from someone else was, he's not playing multi-dimensional chess, he's eating the pieces. I love that. And you've got to laugh because otherwise you will cry. That we're talking about the president of the United States. You've called him a useful idiot. Other people have called him that. Other people who work for him have called him that. But you should also know that the trolls are out on our show right now, and people are asking all kinds of things and attacking you, attacking me. But also people are confused, and this is not a direct attack, so I'm going to show you this one. Is our guest a GOPer?
What does that mean? I'm a journalist. I mean, I've personally have voted for people of both parties, third parties, over all the years I've been voting. No, I'm a journalist. But I would like to think that if a Democrat were elected or a Green Party member were elected who were behaving this way, I would have treated him or her the exact same way. I mean, this is nothing to do with the party. This is having to do with the leadership and the record of Donald J. Trump, Queens, New York.
Someone is posting, I mean, you have to be so careful about false information that in 1555, Nostradamus predicted that there would be a useful idiot would run a greatest power. This is all that fake stuff that you find on the internet that people share, including all those great Abraham Lincoln quotes that aren't true.
Right.
My favorite is Abraham Lincoln saying, a picture with Abraham saying, I didn't say half the SHIT that people say I said on the internet, right? But Jay Berthan says, well done. And Rachel, who's putting together oneshare.world/live. Everyone, please join them. And Pradnya says, your book's title is tough but accurate. And that's important. Rick is asking how can we speak truth to power and to the people? What can we do is the question from Rick Botello.
Well, there is a world of facts there, right? And they're not that hard to find. So we can just go back to those. If people say, the president will say repeatedly that I've done a fantastic job with the coronavirus. I've done the best in the world. Well, then how come Angela Merkel's numbers are so much better than ours, right? And to your point about there being all kinds of nonsense on the internet, absolutely. But you don't expect that nonsense to be coming from the White House official government feed. You don't expect it to be coming out in the briefing room of the White House, right? And that's not an unreasonable expectation.
Where are you on Bob Woodward holding onto his book, the juicy parts of his book for all these months? You've seen the criticism, and by the way, Republican Party and the president himself is now blaming Woodward for this. So if you can analyze that for us, please, and let us know how many minutes you have left, because as you can see, I could keep you here forever. It's Saturday morning. I know you have to be with your family. So tell me how much time you got.
Yeah.
We'll
I've got about another 10 minutes. But as to the Woodward issue, I'm not going to vote for Bob Woodward for president again. I mean, he is not going to win my vote this second term. Forget it. I mean, that's what's remarkable, is that the president is literally saying it was Bob Woodward's fault because he didn't tell the authorities that I'm lying. I mean, what is wrong with him? I mean, that's absurd. As to the decision to withhold that information for the book, I wouldn't have done it. I don't do that. I mean, there's if there was something juicy and interesting and newsworthy, I've written it. There are really no new facts in this book that I have not appeared in HuffPost over the past 3.5 years.
In fact, if I were HuffPost, I would be mad, right? Because
I've been an editor. I've been an editor at NPR. I would be livid if my reporters were holding on to information for a book rather than get it on the air or get it in print immediately. No, that's we're journalists. We should do journalism.
Do you still think Trump is as much an idiot? He sounded far more on top of details about COVID-19 on tape than he presents in public. It looks like he acts like an idiot because he has no soul and thinks it helps him win. This is from Doug Levy, who's in California. Doug, I know you're in Northern California, thinking of you and your family and everybody out there, our friends and family in Northern California, which is on fire. But go ahead, Suresh.
Yeah, interestingly, that's something that the Republican Party, like apparatchiks and top leaders in the party, were telling me in August of 16 that, oh, no, behind closed doors, he's a much different person. He's thoughtful. He's interested in other opinions. He knows things. He's interested in facts. And what I've concluded over the years is that there is an act that the president does. And the act is acting like an adult, right? So when he's behind closed doors, when he was at the New York Times editorial board, and he praised them for being the jewel of American journalism, remember that, in November of 2016 after the election, that was all the act. The real Donald Trump is what we see when he gets up and starts attacking everybody and is tweeting like crazy and just saying nonsense stuff. That is the real Donald Trump. That has been the real Donald Trump for years and years and years. So, yeah, at times he can sound rational, and he's not an idiot in the sense of his inability to process information at times. I have seen him be very clever, the way like a Wolverine is clever in escaping, pursuers or in fighting back or things like that. Back when I asked in March my question about credibility, I think he understood exactly where I was headed with that. Exactly. And so he jumped in, cut off the question, and started rambling about poll numbers. Okay, well, that shows a certain amount of wiliness, I suppose, right? I mean, he understood where I was going and headed it off. Of course, he called on me again a few months later, so that tells you what, I'm not sure. But nonetheless, no, what you see is what you get. This is who he is. You've seen him now for 5 years. He's not.
By the way, just to be clear, you're not comparing him to Hugh Jackman's character in the comic books, because that's Wolverine is sacred to a lot of people. You're talking about
the actual animal.
And also, you're not. This is not a shot against the University of Michigan team.
Nothing against that school. Nothing against the actor or the character. Nothing against the actual animal either. I mean, it is what it is. So.
Yeah, we don't want the Wolverine, all kinds of Wolverine supporters coming at us in anger. But here's Diana's excellent question. Do you get threats from Trump followers? Assume you get trolled, but what about safety? Journalists like him show such courage. Thank you, Diana.
Some threats, and I've ignored them. But, we have training through our company, Verizon Media, on how to deal with that. So, I'm not a woman reporter, and so I'm sure my experience with getting threats is very, very different from what many of my female colleagues get. But you never know when someone is just being a jerk on social media and when someone is seriously got issues who might try to do something about it. And I am situationally aware and try to remain so whenever I'm doing on the ground reporting.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see some of the other questions that are coming in right now. There's so many. I'm just trying to find, because also the trolls are in here. It's hard to kind of pick out the good stuff. Pradya says, obviously this is all important, and I will read Sree's book, but there's a lot to take in on a Saturday morning.
Well, I was on a former White House correspondent, Julie Mason. She has a show on Sirius XM, and she said that it was one of the easiest books to read that she'd read in a while, that it was conversational and went through it like that. So after Saturday morning, I bet you could read it by this evening.
Great. Linda says, sadly, I know many people who vote for Trump just because they're totally anti-Pelosi or Schumer.
Right. So Nancy Pelosi's never been on the ballot nationally, nor has Chuck Schumer. And I've never understood people who are fearful of Nancy Pelosi. I mean, I was told by this president that if Pelosi won the speakership, that we'd be like Venezuela today. And there would be bread shortages and long lines and chaos and, good empanadas, but maybe that's not the best trade-off. That has not happened, right? I look outside right now. We're not like Venezuela, and Nancy Pelosi is speaker. So maybe that ought to be we ought to derive some lesson from that.
And we're closer to being under Venezuela because of Trump and what he's done in the police protests, the brutality protests, and how he's responded much more than any. He's been much like any dictator, authoritarian figure that he likes. It says Trump was cribbing from the White House with the shooting comment. I haven't seen The West Wing. Sorry, it's cribbing from The West Wing, so I haven't seen that. So I'm not sure of that context there. Lots of other comments coming in here. SV, were any other presidents worse than Trump? Sort of Hernandez asks.
Worse is a subjective opinion, of course, but in terms of competence, in terms of paying attention to the job, in the modern era, none, zero. The man doesn't get to work until 11 o'clock noon every single day. I mean, the idea that somehow, which he claims, which his supporters all say that he works harder than anybody else, that's ridiculous. Unless you define work as watching Fox and writing tweets about it. If that's work, then yes, then he works. But no, he doesn't take the job seriously, obviously. And I can't think of anyone going back 100 years who has been like this.
And we've had some presidents who were racists themselves and slave owners and other things as well. Pradnya says, I miss Coronet. That's the Coronet pizza we're talking about. Ellen's watching from Connecticut. Ipshita says hello. Antonio Johnson, whose book is right here, You Next, about Black barbershop culture, is saying hello from Atlanta. Any Atlanta memories?
Airport memories. And actually, I did watch the first Republican debate in 2015 from a very conservative group that was meeting in Atlanta. And I was amazed. These are supposedly religious Christians who were cheering on Trump because he was attacking people. And that was a big warning sign that, something's up, that the party establishment is missing or is not dealing with.
I just want to also say that you've gone for the useful idiot framing of Trump that Vladimir Putin and others also clearly understand. But the Christian right uses another framing. They say he's flawed, but God will send us a flawed vessel to help us, right? So they talk about the Persian King Cyrus as being a terrible person, but doing good things because of his terribleness. And that's another way in which they're able to make the case for Donald Trump.
Right. And I get into that. In fact, I have a chapter called God, Guns, and Russia. And it talks about the Christian right, the NRA, and Putin, and how this weird trinity has evolved that supports each other. I mean, there are a lot of self-described evangelical Christians who are totally okay with Vladimir Putin because he has created a society where that's nominally Christian, homophobic, is almost exclusively white, run by an authoritarian. And they see that as a model for the United States. And that ought to scare people because, I don't think they would like living in Russia. I don't think that is a place that a lot of people aspire. Yeah, I want to move to Moscow, and because I love how Putin is running the country. I don't think there are a lot of people on this planet who would be actually happy if they did that. And that our president is so fond of dictators, almost universally. I'm trying to think of a dictator he doesn't like, and maybe Maduro. Maybe that's it, because I can't think of anyone else.
Maduro is the answer. You're right.
Right. I mean,
and Castro and
right
down in Cuba.
People who it's useful to be opposed to because if you want to win Florida, but every other dictator on the world and wannabe dictator, our president seems to get along with or like or send love letters to. Yes. Right. I mean, he boasts about it. That's the amazing thing. Edna says hello from San Antonio. And Miriam says, great conversation with SV Dáte. Please follow him. He's at SV Dáte. And Antonio saying hello. Sudha says, I'm impressed with the useful idiot terminology for Trump. Mark is watching from Durham, North Carolina. Good conversation. What happens next with QAnon? It is scary, says Vishal Mishra. There are some scary people who are Q adherents, such as it were. But in the end, Hillary Clinton's not going to be arrested. and there's not going to be 60,000 people hauled off in the middle of the night and sent to Guantanamo. So at some point, the conspiracy theory falls apart, and the people move on to the next conspiracy theory. I'm not terribly worried about it. I've talked to QAnon people at rallies, right? And they're misguided. Some of them I'm sure are dangerous, but for the most part, it's just ridiculous and it's silly. But it's, I think it'll go away of its own because it's not a rational framework to look at the world.
Well, just to clarify, though, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is a QAnon not just supporter, like active member,
Right.
it seems, has just lost her opponent, meaning she will now be she was going to win anyway because she's
Right.
a Georgia Republican. But
Yeah.
she's going to be in Congress as a QAnon supporter. And why I would be less dismissive or forgiving perhaps than you, Suresh, is that you remember the Tea Party started very small, the Pizzagate, all of these things have just grown and grown and grown, and now here we are with everything that we're seeing. I know you need to go, so just looking very quickly at some of the comments here. The president said that she's asking about the Bob Woodward excuse that Trump had himself. Doug says this is so depressing, and Frida says, do you see the president's statements on COVID are not consistent? Why is it so? Why is he not consistent on these things? So is he learning at all, or there's no daylight there?
He's not learning a thing. He's not learning a thing. Let's be clear. Why are they not consistent? He's not consistent about anything, about nothing. I mean, on one day he says there's like 10 new auto plants in Michigan. The next day he'll say there's 6 new auto plants in Michigan, and the day after that it'll be 15 new. He makes it up on the spot. That's why there's no consistency. And it's pointless to try to think of him as a rational actor. It's just random things come out of his mouth because that's what he thought of at that moment to say. That's all. It's pretty simple. I mean, imagine asking your toddler, why did you take all the pots out of the cabinet and then throw them all over the floor? And the answer one day might be very different from the next day. Let's not try to analyze it any further than that. We'll just have to put things away.
Rohini says, how did you manage the sudden spotlight after this press conference clip went viral? And there's the clip for those of you who missed it. It's on my Twitter thread. Just search it there. SVDATE is his Twitter handle. Go ahead.
Well, there were some interview requests that I did. It was nice to have more followers that I could promote my stories and for HuffPost on. So that was kind of cool. But I go about my work. I mean, I have to cover the president. I had a pool day coming up. We traveled to Pennsylvania, I think. It was interesting. It had never happened before, but I have a job to do and I do it.
Doug says, I'm really surprised anyone misses Coronet pizza. They taste like cardboard to me. So you can see pizza lovers fighting. I think Trump wants to make a reality show about the presidency. Linda says, I must watch The West Wing. Amazing and uplifting, worth it, if only for Aaron Sorkin's writing. And Doug says, hasn't he actually praised Maduro?
I think at one point, and I don't know if he said this publicly, but I believe there's reporting that he admired his tenacity or some such, but he admires all dictators. I wouldn't be surprised by that, but he has been trained to oppose Maduro because that's what you need to do in order to win South Florida.
All right. Before we let you go, I want to ask you two things. Number one, how significant is it that we are less than 60 days to the elections and the entire election chaos that the president himself has engendered? How significant is that?
No, that's a big deal. We have seen that the president will cheat. He cheats all the time. He cheated to win 2016 when he accepted Russian help, knowing that it was Russian help. Right? Let's not forget that. He was told in August that the Russians had stolen those emails, and yet he got out there every single day in that final month and touted the stolen emails from Russia when he knew they were from Russia. Okay, so he tried to cheat by basically extorting, right, the new president of Ukraine. And that didn't work. He got impeached over this, in fact. He tried to cheat by telling China to buy a whole bunch of farm goods so I can win re-election. He will try to cheat.
And he cheated on his wives multiple times.
What deals he has with them is whatever. I mean, if you're willing to marry him, then I guess you know what you're buying. On the matter of what's coming up, I mean, Bill Barr has shown that he's willing to clear a public protest with tear gas and beatings in order to help the president do his photo op. What else is he willing to do? We have seen the president willing to delegitimize this coming election by casting doubt on ballots. I mean, the military votes with mail ballots, has been doing so for years, right? We don't say that those are all fraud. I mean, that's ridiculous. And
he's voted in by mail-in balloting himself.
Absolutely. Right. And by the way, let me point out, he's actually never lived in Florida. Yes, he's had Mar-a-Lago, but by a contract that he himself signed, he is not allowed to live there. And yet he's using it as a legal address for mail voting, right? So it's not the mail voting that bothers him. He explained exactly why he opposes mail voting in a March 30th interview on Fox News. And he said, if we have that kind of level of voting, a Republican will never win again. It's pretty clear why he opposes mail voting, because more people will vote. And in his view, the more people vote, the less likely he is to get a second term. So yeah, there's quite a bit to be worried about regarding the way the election is handled, whether all the votes are counted, and the chaos the president absolutely will try to generate on that matter. So people who care about democracy ought to be paying attention.
And my final question to you is, tell us what we should be looking for in the next 50-something days and after, because we may not have a result on November 3rd, the night, or even in the morning. Even last time, you remember the concession speech didn't come till Wednesday morning. This could be days or weeks.
Yeah, well, people have to know that the election is not decided by a concession speech. The president could claim to be the emperor of the planet. That doesn't make him so. And he could claim that he won the election. And if the actual vote tallies in 50 different states say that he's not, then he's not. He could refuse to leave the White House. And if he loses, and if he refuses to leave, then on January 20th, 2021, at 1 second past noon, he becomes a trespasser. And, that's that. So I'm not that worried about what he says about it, so long as people understand that what he says about it is not determinative. Whether he concedes or he doesn't concede, doesn't matter. Just doesn't matter. That's not what's in the Constitution as to who wins the election.
But you have faith in the rest of the system that it doesn't matter what he says.
I have faith in the election administration systems in the individual states, yes, because they had been doing a good job by and large. There have been some glitches, but by and large, we do a good job with actually counting votes that are cast and actually tallying them honestly. So as long as people vote the way they're supposed to vote the way they want to vote, and people are paying attention to how that's being done in the individual states, yeah, we'll have a fair result. And it doesn't matter whether the president doesn't like it, what he tweets about it the next morning. The numbers are the numbers, and his acceptance or lack of acceptance of them doesn't make them any less real.
All right. Here's a final comment. Carlos says, SV, had asked the question no other reporter had the balls to ask. This guy is the man. So unless this is your best friend from high school, that's a pretty good comment to end the show on. Even if it is your best friend from high school. SV Dáte, Sree Sreenivasan Dáte, the White House correspondent for Huffington Post and the author of Useful Idiot, a new book about Donald Trump. Please check that out, and please follow him on Twitter at SVDATE. Thanks very much, Sree. So grateful to have you here. So great to have you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, and goodbye. And folks, wasn't that an amazing session? We are live every single day on this show, talking about various aspects of everything that's going on, and we are so grateful to all of you for being here. Please tag your friends right now so that they can watch this show later. This is such an important conversation. I know that you found it useful, you found it interesting. Please have your friends watch by tagging them at this moment so that they can watch this later. It really, we really appreciate it when folks are able to watch, even if they can't watch it live, they can watch it later. So please do share with your friends and family. We also want to tell you what's coming up. The weekends are busy around here at Digimentors. We do 5 shows on the weekend, so no holiday here. So we have this show at 9 a.m. on Saturday, and then from noon to 2, we have a radio show. Today it's noon to 1 on WBAI. My guest is Dr. Anisha Abraham, pediatrician and teen health expert, author of Raising Global Teens, at Dr. Anisha Abraham. She'll be my guest at noon Eastern on WBAI 99.5 FM and worldwide on WBAI.org. Please tune in for that. And it's a call-in show, so you can ask her all the questions you'd like. And that's our Saturday. Our Sunday starts with the New York Times read-along, where I read the New York Times out loud like a crazy person, almost 5 years. And my guest is David Housewright, the past president of the Private Eye Writers of America and winner of the Edgar Award from the Mystery Writers of America. Will read the print edition of the New York Times, 8:30 a.m. Eastern. At 11 a.m. Eastern, we executive produce She's on Call, 2 fabulous surgeons talking about coronavirus and so much more. 11 a.m. Eastern, She's on Call. You don't want to miss that. And finally, on Sunday night, we have our other show, which is the daily global COVID-19 show, Positivity with Damon Brown, author of Build From Now, How to Know Your Power, See Your Abundance, and Nourish the World, 9 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Big thank you to our producers and our sponsors, nonbelievable.com. Thank you so much for supporting us. Every cookie is 1 meal that they donate. Divinely delicious cookies on a mission, 20% off with the code SREE. Big thank you to The Inventor in You, a step-by-step guide to your first invention by Charles Cunnincarroll. He's a developer of more than 80 patents. He's at Inventor Charles, and guidetoinvention.com is his website. Please check it out. And also thank you to Muckrack Academy for Fundamentals of Social Media, a free on-demand certification course that you can take. More than 4,000 people have taken the course already. Here are some of the certificates they've gotten. mrac.co/social, mrac.co/social. And finally, big thanks to our friends at One Shared World, Rise or Fall Together, the World Interdependence Summit, oneshared.world. Please sign up. They have the Dalai Lama and Dr. Tedros from the WHO are speakers, and it's a free event this Thursday, 9 to noon Eastern. So please join us for that, oneshared.world. Thank you very much, everybody, and we'll see you soon. I'll just see all the comments. There are still lots of comments coming in. Thank you very much. Please tell your friends. Please follow me on YouTube. You just hit subscribe, and you can subscribe, and you'll know when we're live, and you can see the entire archive there. And one last thing, you can get an alert when we are live using this QR code. I will send you a gentle reminder by WhatsApp if you hold up your phone right now. And this is not a WhatsApp group. It is just a gentle WhatsApp alert when I am live on the air. So please join us for that. Thanks very much, everybody. Goodbye.